Funding for the production of Folks is made possible in part by a grant from Union National Life Insurance, serving Louisiana and the South since 1926. A family-managed corporation providing whole life insurance.
Straight ahead on Folks, is ownership the answer to black underemployment in the media? And why do so few blacks own radio and television stations? A look at these questions and more as we take a look beyond the anchor desk in media. Also, a look at Project Alpha, a group of community leaders in Baton Rouge who are working to make a positive difference in the lives of black youth. All on today's edition of Folks. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Folks. I'm Sonya Masingale. Mass media is one of the most exciting and fast-paced businesses in the world. Before you receive the most minute picture on your television screen or hear the first words of a radio broadcast, countless years of technical expertise and training have gone into making it possible. Most people believe that the only worthwhile job to hold is that of an anchorman, announcer, or reporter, but those jobs are actually a very small part of any media operation. Still, for blacks, getting any kind of job in mass media is difficult at best. Then staying in the job long enough to advance to upper-level management is close to impossible. Thanks to changes in federal laws, things have gotten a little better in the past 2 decades, but progress towards hiring and promoting blacks in media is excruciatingly slow. A Radio and Television News Directors Association study showed that there was a 17% decrease of black male employment in the newsroom in 1985. Mainly because there is so little opportunity for blacks to advance. Recently, the Louisiana Black Media Coalition held its 2nd annual conference in New Orleans entitled Beyond the Anchor Desk: Alternative Opportunities in Media. One of the conference panels addresses ownership as an alternative for blacks in media.
Last week, the Senate issued a legislative piece that told these folks to leave the minority ownership rules alone. They had tried to declare the tax certificate policy, the distress sale policy, and the preference policy in the applications for new licenses unconstitutional.
Pluria Marshall is president of the National Black Media Coalition, the only civil rights organization which works exclusively with mass communications.
The Supreme Court has, in fact, reaffirmed many of the affirmative action policies in the last 2 years. We're very pleased with that happening with this Supreme Court. I don't know if many of you read USA Today yesterday, and they had the editorial page was about affirmative action programs with a slant toward women. But I want you all to know that much of that effort has concentrated its energies on white women. 3 years ago, we had a 1% increase in black women in broadcasting. For white women, the increase was 18%.
A large part of the coalition's mission targets increased ownership of communications properties by blacks, but it is difficult and expensive to venture into. Should blacks make ownership a top priority?
People might put ownership ahead of it, but no. I think to get more blacks in the ranks of the everyday worker, writer, producer, director, manager, employment is still the most important area in the media that blacks ought to be concentrating on.
This panel discussion at the Louisiana Black Media Coalition conference in New Orleans involves the issue of black ownership of media properties. All of those on the panel own some sort of media property. Here they tell how they came into ownership.
So for 3 years, I worked 60 hours a week at the bank and 30 hours a week at the radio station for no pay and was 40 miles away from the bank just to learn the business. So the other aspect is that you have to pay your dues.
Jim Hutchinson is the president of Interurban Broadcasting. In addition to WYLD Radio in New Orleans, Interurban owns broadcast properties in St. Louis, Cincinnati, and Savannah.
It was a result of a black bank, a black-owned bank, that loaned us the money to turn the deal. The station we purchased at that time the price was $190,000. We went to every bank in the Chicagoland area. And since we were in banking, obviously we knew quite a few of the other bankers. No bank would loan us that money on any basis except for a black-owned bank, which was Seaway National Bank of Chicago. That's another reason why we have to support our black institutions. And going forth, after we went through all the trouble in getting the station, we closed on June 30, 1977, probably in the biggest rainstorm in the history of that area. I say that because after we closed, we came out to turn on our new station and was off the air. The lightning had struck the transmitter, etc. We were completely off the air. So that was our baptism into the radio business.
Broadcasting is, in my opinion, I don't usually qualify things, but I'll say, in my opinion, the most closed, discriminatory industry in the United States of America. Those of you who work in it know what I'm talking about. This is my 38th year in broadcasting, and I'm still alive. I did the weekends and the overnights, like y'all. Started in radio, went to television. I've worked in television in Europe, in the music end, been a DJ, taught at Columbia School of Journalism. Share with you what I tell my students. You may be 30 years old right now. I'd like the most important thing for you to understand is you're probably going to be working another 50 years. So those of you who say, well, I want to be the sports reporter for the Houston Chronicle, you may be stringing for AP on the moon 40 years from now. So this is a kind of an industry where no matter how close and how discriminatory it is, you ought to have your priorities set a long way down the road if you're going towards ownership. And that means putting in time as a director.
Barbara Lamont is president of Crescent City Communications in New Orleans, which owns WCCL Channel 49 TV and a teleport.
One of the things that we did is we did something that they taught me in business school called vertical integration. We weren't making it too well in television. We were having trouble getting money, having trouble getting built, and you can't bootstrap past a certain point. We have our equipment on order and no working capital. And what do you do with a situation like that? So we did something called vertical integration. We started a second company in a related field. And if I can spend the rest of my short time and would like to have questions afterwards, I'd like to tell you a little bit about what we did. We went into building a teleport. Now, you're not dumb. Nobody knows what a teleport is. They launched the first satellites in 79, 80, 81, and the teleport industry started, not even an industry, in 83 and 84. So you're talking about a very new industry. The largest teleport in the country today is IDB in Los Angeles. They occupy 23,000 square feet, and they have 9 big satellite dishes, 10 big satellite dishes, and a 4-story building crammed onto that property. They started in the founder's living room with $33,000 in 1984, and they did $18 million in business in 1987, I'm sorry. This is an enormous business. There are 10 or 12 teleports in the country, only 5 or 6 international teleports. We are building in New Orleans a full-scale Class A Intelsat Earth Station facility, a teleport. And what teleports do is receive and transmit signals to transponders in the sky and then take them down all over the world.
Lamont and Hutchinson both agree that the struggle for ownership is costly, confusing, and takes a long time to accomplish. So where is the country going in terms of blacks in media?
I think that we're going in a disjointed pattern. The black journalists are going this way, the black owners are going this way, the black community is going this way. And what we're hoping is that we can get all those elements together and we can go up the road together because it just makes the work so much more difficult. You know, I want us to work smarter instead of harder. I mean, we're working hard as hell right now. And we don't have to work that hard if we would just network more, if we would share more, if we would give more. And I think it's something that we just have to do. We don't mind folks, you know, tripping on their egos and, you know, that kind of thing. But at times it's too critical for us not to communicate on a regular basis and network as we should, so that we can get black people in the way white folks get white folks in on a regular basis.
Joining us in the studio to discuss some of the difficulties of independent media ownership and maintenance of media properties is Sandra Nathan. She is the president of the Nathan Group in Baton Rouge, a public relations and media marketing group which markets individuals and organizations to the black community. Peter Moncrieffe, he's the president and general manager of KQXL 106.3 FM in New Roads and Baton Rouge, and Bill Tucker. He's also part owner of KQXL 106.3 FM and also owner of a real estate firm here in Baton Rouge. Welcome to folks.
Good afternoon.
How difficult, Mr. Tucker, was it to purchase KQXL? And did you use any of the special programs for blacks to purchase radio stations?
Well, it took, first of all, it took a very long time. It started with a desire, that desire being fueled by the observation of the way media in Baton Rouge handled some of the local black events and some of the local black spokespersons and what have you. So the interest was generated by that, and realizing that one of the important things that we could do to help black people realize their potential and get more positive images was to be in control of that media through ownership. So it started with that desire. The next thing, of course, was to identify a broadcast property that would be feasible for us, and we were just lucky in that sense to identify something here in the Baton Rouge area. So from there, it took the financial aspect of it, and that capital formation aspect is typically where blacks in business have the greatest problem.
Did you also encounter this problem?
Of course we did, to a large degree, because broadcasting by its very nature is a capital-intensive kind of business to purchase equipment and the salaries involved and what have you. So we incurred a great deal of difficulty there. But there are some FCC rules that have been recently challenged and what have you that obviously serve to greatly promulgate minority ownership in the media.
Such as the tax certificate law. I forget what the others are. Do you remember what?
Well, the tax certificate is paramount. The tax certificate affords an investor that owns a broadcast property to sell it to a member of a minority group and not have to pay taxes on the capital gains of that sale for some 3 years. So that was paramount. Of course, there are other preferences for applications for minorities and what have you. But the tax certificate and distress sale, I think, have served as the greatest vehicles to increase minority ownership in America.
Did you use one of those in order to purchase KQXL?
Yes, we did. The owner of the station at that time used the tax certificate rule. And the net capital gains that he had on the sale, he was able to defer paying any tax on that for the 3-year period. And of course, if you reinvest during that 3-year period, the tax is then deferred until the ultimate sale of the new investment. So that was utilized in our transaction. So that assists us because it brings about a little bit better perspective on values. Because if an investor can realize a substantial tax savings by selling to a minority, then he is somewhat encouraged, to seek out minorities as possible buyers for the property. So I think it's a great vehicle.
About how long did it take from the conception of the idea to actually putting up the tower and going on the air?
Well, I can tell you. The idea started back in 1980 when I said the desire and about owning. The actual purchase was realized in January of '83. Of course, I can't tell you all of the things that we went through in that 3-year period, but all along the way we ran into many different hurdles that had to be dealt with. So it took us 3 years. After the purchase, again, we were fortunate because KQXL, as you know, is licensed to New Roads, Louisiana. So because of some rulings by the FCC, we were able to move our tower, our transmitter site, in closer to the Baton Rouge area, and thereby take advantage of this void that existed in the Baton Rouge marketplace at that time.
Okay, this is where Mr. Moncrieffe comes in. Just because you're a black station doesn't necessarily mean that all of the advertisers who support, because that's the bottom line for all broadcasting.
Right.
You've got to have advertisers to make the money to run the station.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to support you. What kind of response have you had from the community to your station in terms of listenership and in terms of supporting you with advertising dollars?
Okay, first, well, listenership, we've had great response. This KQXL was the first black FM in the market. So the listeners yearn to have a black FM. Okay, on the other side of the coin, the advertising side of it, it wasn't that easy. Well, Tucker can attest, when we first bought the station, a lot of the advertisers in that New Roads area pulled off the station, which in turn left us with a station with very little advertising, a note to meet every month, and very little money coming in. So it was a struggle that first year. Now,
How is it coming now?
Now, as we move into Baton Rouge, we've gotten a stronger signal in the Baton Rouge. Our listenership is up, and the numbers reflect that. So the advertisers are gradually coming toward Q106.
But I understand it's very slow. There was an article in the Business Report here in Baton Rouge a few weeks ago that said that basically the white advertisers who need to attract the black business are not investing the kind of money they should.
No, they're not. White advertisers as a whole, they tend to feel that they don't need to advertise to the black consumer. You know, you don't know if it's prejudice or just ignorance to the fact that black people have a lot of money to spend. I think in the black households here in the United States, you're looking at about $200 billion of spendable income that the advertisers need to tap into that market. And that black people do have money to spend, and they will spend it if the advertisers would target that market.
Mrs. Nathan, being a public relations group is not exactly a media property, but you do have a lot of power to pull in the money for the media properties, because you're representing the people that are buying the time on those radio and television stations. And I guess, do you find much resistance from the people who you're marketing to black media properties in terms of support?
Well, I don't know if support is the right way to put it. I would have to agree with Peter in that white advertisers, and then you'll have to include white clients of mine, which are generally political clients, but both of them, neither one of them have realized yet that inside of the black community there are doctors and lawyers and teachers and engineers, as Peter says, people with a sizable amount of income that has money to spend on just about anything there is in the country to purchase. And it's in 1988, unfortunately, they have not realized that, so they're not as willing as they ought to be to put money into this market, unfortunately. I think it's out of ignorance. I really do feel that when they see the black community or think of the black community, they just think of black, something negative, welfare recipients, that kind of thing. They don't realize that inside of the black community there are a lot of entities that have the money to come and purchase various goods and services, so they don't, as of right now, put the kind of money into black advertising that they should.
Okay. Mr. Tucker, you mentioned today that there was an article in the Wall Street Journal that kind of touched on what we're talking about. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, 2 weeks ago or so, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal that talked about the advertisers targeting into racial, ethnic type groups. And they talked about the pullback that advertisers are now doing in targeting black consumers. And it also talked about an increase now that advertisers are doing to reach Hispanic consumers. And the whole thing is a little bit disproportionate when you look at the numbers, because by the Wall Street Journal figures, the estimated consumer dollars for Hispanics was like 134 billion, and the consumer dollars for blacks over 200 billion, but they're still spending more to reach Hispanic consumers. So I think one quote from the newspaper was that black people are not dark-skinned white people, which I think sums up the whole issue very well, because black people have customs, habits, frequent different types of places, and so on and so forth, that make them a unique ethnic market that deserves very special attention. And I don't know if it's just from ignorance. I think that, you know, still in America we do have some racial prejudice that comes into the picture in terms of making these buys, because, you know, the broadcast industry has been one of the most prejudiced industry in terms of making jobs, employment available, and what have you. Ownership has certainly been a problem, as we can attest to. So I think that there is a certain small faction of people in America that still, because of their own insight into the problem, do not buy black radio and would rather buy to target the Hispanic market than blacks. So it's a problem.
Well, it's good to know that these things are being chronicled in our well-known journals, such as the Wall Street Journal, and that there's somebody that's studying it, and hopefully we'll see an improvement in the future. Thank you for coming to Folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our final feature for today introduces us to Project Alpha, a conference initiated locally by Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity to alert young people to the consequences of teenage pregnancy, drug abuse, and AIDS. This is Project Alpha in action. The national fraternity has made the welfare of young blacks a priority, and by bringing these young people together with local physical and mental health professionals and other concerned adults, they are hoping to make a positive difference in their future.
And it seems as if the difference between young adults and your more elderly adults is that the elderly adults were no more wiser or no more talented and less plagued by problems than you are today. As a teenager, I do not remember being any more gifted, any more talented. I suffered with the same persecution complex. I was never fast enough. I could never jump high enough. Never had enough popularity. These were the problems that seemingly plagued all of us. But there is one difference between young adults and your older adults, and that is seemingly older adults have been able to experience the fragility of life.
Prince Wales, a member of the Alpha fraternity, says that most of the information and pressure about teenage pregnancy is directed to young women. His fraternity is seeing to it that these young men also understand that teenage pregnancy impacts them as well.
One of the reasons is that, as we know, that Louisiana has one of the highest rates of teen pregnancy in the United States. We are also aware that we are also in the bottom of the totem pole, at the bottom of the totem poles, I should say, as far as high school graduates. With those combined, we are aware that they may come in hand.
Project Alpha was initiated for young men only, but the auxiliary to the East Baton Rouge Medical Association worked with the Alphas to bring young women into the conference as well.
The auxiliary to the East Baton Rouge Parish Medical Association, in conjunction with our national program, has a project called Project Sun, which is shared support and services for the unborn and the newborn. The other project is a direct complement to ours. So we thought, as so many do now, to join forces and reach that many teenagers and preteens.
J.W. Vaughn, who's president of the Alpha chapter and is also chairman of the board of directors here at Barranco Clark Y, mentioned to me that they were going to be doing Project Alpha, and I said, that's wonderful. The Medical Auxiliary has a similar program of national scope and direction of teenage pregnancy prevention, and could we piggyback? Could we network, coalesce, and tie our program in with yours? And we have just, the two groups have worked beautifully with this.
Some of us parents are ill-equipped because we don't know ourselves. Then there still is that shyness that exists, and so many parents who think that this is a no-no you find out on your own. Those of us who have been exposed to these things, who know the importance of education, health and education, to come to the forefront and present it, because these people who are here today are the ones who are going to really shape the future of our country and really of the world.
I'm hoping that we can plant a seed for the future. I'm hoping that by letting them know that there are resources within the community who are interested in them, who do care about their well-being, who want them to develop their full potential, and want them to become a viable and important member of the community, not only for themselves, but for future generations as well.
The organizers of this conference are mostly parents themselves, but their concerns for Black youth goes beyond their own families.
What I'm really hoping is going to come out of this is these young ladies taking a leadership role and spreading the word among their friends and their churches and their youth groups and through their schools, that it's okay to refrain.
Just believe in yourself as we believe in you.
That brings us to the close of our program for today. Be sure to tune in next week for another edition of Folks. Bye-bye.
Funding for the production of Folks is made possible in part by a grant from Union National Life Insurance, serving Louisiana and the South since 1926, a family-managed corporation providing whole life insurance.